left is systematically making this country less safe by depriving law-abiding Americans the ability to protect themselves. Whether it's at a Starbucks or at City Hall or on a military base, gun-free zones in so many cases haven't saved lives, but instead have helped end lives. Nikki Gosar knows that well. She's the author of Stalked and Defenseless: How Gun Control Helped My Stalker Murder My Husband in Front of Me. She joins us tonight. Nikki, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So the subtitle of your book seems to be pretty self-explanatory. Recap what happened, if you don't mind, for us.
My husband, Benjamin, was murdered right in front of me by a man who was stalking me. And because of Tennessee state law at the time, I had to leave my legal permitted firearm that I normally carried for self-defense locked in my vehicle because the restaurant we were at was a gun-free zone, and I obeyed that law. The man who was stalking me did not have a handgun carry permit. He brought a gun in illegally to a gun-free zone and shot my husband 7 times in front of myself and everyone in the middle of a busy restaurant. I will probably wonder for the rest of my life if I could have prevented that. Of course, I'll never know because I was denied a chance. I was stalked and defenseless.
That is just that's a breathtakingly awful story. What's so striking about it is the point that you made that the man who did it, the murderer, wasn't deterred by the law because, of course, he's a murderer. He didn't care.
Right. And that's what I've tried really hard to do for years, is try to educate people about the dangers of gun-free zones and how bad guys don't care. They don't care about the law. These gun control laws really only impact good law-abiding people to make them helpless, defenseless, stop these horrible things from happening.
So I think normal people understand that intuitively, and certainly when someone like you who's lived it, whose life, the tragedy in your life explains the point you're making so clearly, you don't need to say more. But there are people who hear your story and still aren't convinced. What do they say to you?
Oh, people will say, what makes you think that you could have stopped him? Or it would be more dangerous to have other guns, in the equation. And look, if the bad guy is the only one with a gun, guess who wins?
Yeah. People's hearts are really troubled by the violence they see, mass shootings and stuff. Normal people are upset by that, and I understand it. But once they hear your story and stories like it, sincere, totally sincere story like yours, hard to imagine that they couldn't change their minds in the face of that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. One thing that's really frustrating for me is, you hear Democrats talk about they want more and more gun control laws.
Yes.
But then when it comes right down to it, take, for instance, the prosecutor for my husband's murder case.
Yes.
He did not charge the murderer with any of the gun control law violations. He was not charged with carrying a handgun without a permit. He was not charged with carrying a gun illegally into a gun-free zone. Those charges could have been put out there and he could have gotten even more prison time. But that prosecutor didn't do that. Why do we have these gun control laws if you're not going to charge these people?
Let me ask you one last question. Do you think Nancy Pelosi goes to restaurants without being protected by someone with a gun? Do you think Adam Schiff would go to a restaurant without having someone carrying a gun nearby at taxpayer expense?
I used to be a staffer in D.C. for Congressman Thomas Massie, and when I would walk into the work, I would see Nancy Pelosi outside, either getting in or out of a very large SUV with personal security detail. She has detail with her all the time.
Yeah. They don't have guns, though, like in gun-free zones, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah,
they have guns.
Oh, they do. And they bring those guns into gun-free zones.
Her security detail does. Her security detail certainly does.
So it almost seems like she thinks her life is more valuable than yours or the life of your husband.
Yeah, Nancy's life is not more valuable than anyone else's. She might think that. But no. We all should have the basic human right of self-defense.
Amen. Thank you, Nikki, for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's a terrible story. The last days of this decade are going the way the previous 10 years won't. We're in the middle of a brutal culture war. Leftists are attacking a new film for being too white and a new play for being too male. That's coming up next.